All right. It's almost like we're expecting something to happen. Well, you're going to be disappointed. Okay. Genesis chapter 47. We're going to, I think, we should, if all goes to plan, we'll finish our time in Genesis this morning. We may not, may have to come back next week for it. Genesis 47, we've got Jacob and the brothers have made their way from Canaan back down to Egypt where they're going to stay. So I want to just start in by taking a look at, let's just look at these first 6 verses of chapter 47. Joseph went in and told Pharaoh, "My father and my brothers with their flocks and herds and all that they possess have come from the land of Canaan. They're now in the land of Goshen." And from among his brothers he took 5 men and presented them to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to his brothers, "What's your occupation?" And they said to Pharaoh, "Your servants are shepherds, as our fathers were." They said to Pharaoh, "We have come to sojourn in the land, for there's no pasture for your servants' flocks, for the famine is severe in the land of Canaan. And now please let your servants dwell in the land of Goshen." And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Settle your fathers and your brothers in the best of the land. Let them settle in the land of Goshen. If you know any able men among them, put them in charge of my livestock." So we've seen the way that God's taken care of Jacob so far, and he continues as they come to Egypt. Joseph had already told the brothers earlier, and I don't know whether he jumped the gun or what, but he had told them that you're going to come and you can settle in the land of Goshen. And now, like he goes back and he runs this by Pharaoh now, right? And we're going, well, they're here. I told you they were coming. And they're in Goshen, and Pharaoh says, good, that's where they ought to be, in the best of the land. We think we mentioned this briefly last week. Joseph coaching his brothers on what to say to Pharaoh is to tell them that they are shepherds. The Egyptians have a very low regard for shepherds and will probably keep them separate. Okay? And then he also, so when Pharaoh asked, what do you do? We're shepherds. They said, okay, well, Goshen sounds like a good spot for you, right? And not just that, but you can have some of your folks that can take care of my flocks and herds, which are going to grow quite a bit here really soon. And so one of the next things that we see is, beside Jacob meeting Pharaoh and blessing him, let's go ahead and read that part. Joseph brought Jacob, his father, and stood him before Pharaoh. Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Jacob, how many are the days of the years of your life? And Jacob said to Pharaoh, the days of the years of my sojourning are 130. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their sojourning. Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from his presence. Joseph settled his father and his brothers, gave them the possession in the land of Egypt, and the best of the land of Ramesses, as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph provided his father, his brother, all his father's household with food according to the number of their dependents. I like Jacob's response here. 130 years, few and evil have been my days. Now, if we go back through the life of Jacob, we could probably say, and probably with a good degree of accuracy say, few and evil have been the days of your life, and you brought a lot of that on yourself. Right? However, I would say that most of us could say the same kind of thing. I'm not going to ask anybody how many of the days of the years are of your life. I know better than that. But no matter what that number is, however high or low that number is, there's probably a part of that we could look at as it would say few and evil. Right? Jacob's life has been characterized by a lot of turbulence, let's say. And I don't think there's anybody that I know, maybe we see this different, But I don't know that there's anybody that I can think of that would say that Jacob has deserved what he gets here of settling in the best of the land of Egypt and being rescued. Right? I mean, come on, we cheat his brother out of his birthright, father out of a blessing. Not really a stand-up guy to begin with, but God rescues him. And I think we could probably all say the same thing. None of us deserve what it is that God's done for us. Right? As much as we'd like to think that we're really, really good people, few and evil might characterize our days more than we'd like for them to. How about that? All right. The rest of this, we're not going to read the rest of it until we get for a little ways. I'm just going to kind of talk through it. An interesting thing that I think sometimes gets overlooked is the way that the rest of the famine plays out. The people of Egypt come to Joseph and they spend all that they have to buy food. Okay? And that sustains them. And we don't really know the number, right? We don't know the number of years that we are into this at this point. But we do know that they come and they spend all that they have, and then when they come back, they say, we don't have anything. Right? We have no more, there's no more money, but we still need to survive. And so in exchange for food, they give their livestock. So now Pharaoh or the government owns the livestock. Right? And that sustains them for another year. And then they come back again. They go, we have nothing. Right? We've already given up our livestock. What else can we possibly give? The only thing that we have to give is our bodies and our land. And they say, okay, we'll take it. That's pretty much it. Pharaoh, the government of Egypt, the ruling powers of Egypt, take possession of the land, of all of Egypt, with the exception of where the priests live. The land of the priests is already taken care of, subsidized by the government already. But they take the rest of it. And what essentially ends up happening, what it looks like anyway, is that Pharaoh becomes the landlord and the Egyptians become the tenant farmers. They give them, Pharaoh supplies them with seed, and all he asks is a mere 20%. But 1/5 of whatever you produce goes back to Pharaoh. You keep the rest. And I don't know, there's been those who say if we could figure this out, because, okay, I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole, but we'll go just a little ways. There's confusion among biblical scholars as to the date of the Exodus, right? There's a couple of options of when it is that Israel actually leaves Egypt, and they're a couple of centuries apart. And so there are those who say if we could figure this part out, right? If we could figure out when it is that Egypt becomes this sort of a government, then we could probably walk our way into the date. We could figure out which Pharaoh it is, and then we could make our way down through the line. The problem is we can't figure that out, or nobody that I've seen has been able to figure out exactly when this happens. But I don't know that that's necessarily the point. I think what's happening is, or one of the things that we see with this is setting up what we're going to see in the Exodus, right? I kind of wonder, and I realize that we have a huge cultural difference, but you kind of wonder, as you think about the Exodus, that as the plagues begin to come and the land is beginning to be destroyed, right, there's a spot in there, I don't remember exactly where it is, there's actually a place in there where the advisors to Pharaoh come and say, hey, knock it off, right? You're destroying the entire land. because of your stubbornness. I mean, I don't think they come out and say this like that, but that's kind of the idea. You do kind of wonder that if there were those who would have maybe could put a little more pressure on Pharaoh to change his mind. But if the government owns everything, if he already owns everything, then it's all under his control, I guess, to destroy if he wants to. And I guess that kind of sets up the authority that he has, not just as ruler, but ruler over everything, now owning all the livestock and all the land and the people working for him as tenant farmers. All right? All right, enough of that. Go down to verse 29. When the time drew near that Israel must die, he called his son Joseph and said to him, "If now I have found favor in your sight, put your hand under my thigh and promise to deal kindly and truly with me. Do not bury me in Egypt, but let me lie with my fathers. Carry me out of Egypt, bury me in their burying place." And he answered, "I will do as you have said." And then he said, "Swear to me." And he swore to him. Israel bowed himself upon the head of his bed. Right, there's no big secret here that Joseph's always been the favorite. Joseph is now at least functioning as, and I think we'll see this even more, as the firstborn. This would be the responsibility of the firstborn, is to care for the parent and take care of them in burial. And so Israel has called Joseph to say, "You're my guy." We've seen this kind of swearing take place before. Abraham and his servant, as he sends him to go find a wife for Isaac. Okay? Swear to me. It's a strange custom, but hey, it's a custom nonetheless. And then we find this little section of Israel. Then Israel bowed himself. It says that on the head of his bed is how the ESV translates it. Another way is on his staff. There are those who say this is another glimpse back at the fulfillment of one of Joseph's dreams. Right? The first dream is the brothers bow down to him. The second dream, Israel himself bows down to Joseph. I don't know. It's interesting to think about. But we see this here because this leads right into the very next thing. All right, chapter 48. This is fun. It is for me. After this, Joseph was told, "Behold, your father is ill." So he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. It was told to Jacob, "Your son Joseph has come to you." Israel summoned his strength and sat up in bed. Jacob said to Joseph, "God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me, and said to me, Behold, I will make you fruitful and multiply you. I will make of you a company of peoples, and will give this land to your offspring after you for an everlasting possession. And now your two sons, who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt, are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, as Reuben and Simeon are. And the children that you fathered after them shall be yours. They shall be called by the name of their brothers in their inheritance. As for me, when I came from Padan, to my sorrow, Rachel died in the land of Canaan on the way, when there was still some distance to go to Ephrath, and I buried there on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. When Israel saw Joseph's sons, he said, Who are these? Joseph said to his father, These are my sons, whom God has given me here. And he said, Bring them to me, that I may bless them. The eyes of Israel were dim with age, so that he could not see. Joseph brought them near him, he kissed them, and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, I never expected to see your face, and behold, God has let me see your offspring also. Then Joseph removed them from his knees, bowed himself with his face to the earth, and he took them both, Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left hand, Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near him. As Israel stretched out his right hand laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left hand on the head of Manasseh, crossing his hands, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, "The God before whom my father Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the boys. And in them let my name be carried on, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth." When Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him. And he took his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's. And Joseph said to his father, said, "Not this way, my father, since this one is firstborn, put your right hand on his head." But his father refused and said, "I know, my son, I know. He shall also become a people. He also shall be great. Nevertheless, his younger brother shall be greater than he. His offspring shall become a multitude of nations." So he blessed them that day, saying, "By you Israel will pronounce blessings, saying, God make you as Ephraim and as Manasseh." And he put Ephraim before Manasseh. Okay, here we go. All right? There's a little bit of strangeness here in the narrative, I think. Joseph finds out that Israel's about to die, so he brings his two sons, right? And Israel's really happy, and then all of a sudden he looks and says, "Who are these two?" Right? So I don't know whether that just means he's getting old and forgetful, or if there's something here to that. It's interesting to me that Israel is in the condition of his father, Isaac. His eyes are dim, can't see, and here comes the blessing. And so Joseph arranges it the way it's supposed to be. Manasseh, right? Manasseh is the oldest, so he comes to Israel's right. Ephraim is the youngest, and here he comes. And as they come, and they get ready for Jacob to bless them, he crosses his hands and does it like this. And Joseph says, of all people, okay, Joseph says, don't do it like that, right? He's the oldest. You just got elevated basically to the role of firstborn in the family, and you're not the oldest by a long shot. And Jacob says, no, this is how it's supposed to be. Now, I hope we're used to this, right? We've made it all the way through Genesis, and I hope we're used to this because this keeps going, of God picking the underdog, right? It's not the firstborn, it's the youngest. I think we could go all the way back to Cain and Abel, couldn't we? Cain and Abel. Cain is the oldest, am I right? Somebody with me here? Okay. Doesn't work out very well for him, right? Because God favors Abel, at least the sacrifice of Abel, to the point that Cain kills him. Well, when he's driven out, it's the line of Seth, who is the youngest. He gets carried through. We get, right, I mean, Jacob and Esau is a prime example. That the older will serve the younger. And this doesn't stop. We see it again here. That God is turning things, the way the world sees things, God turns them the other direction. Jacob adopts Manasseh and Ephraim. They are no longer Joseph's. They belong to Israel. And I think, and this is all I've got to think on this. Are you ready? The rest of his sons. There are two sons that do not necessarily receive a blessing, only a curse. Right? And I think that is Reuben and Simeon, who are mentioned here. And I'm wondering if Jacob sees Ephraim and Manasseh as replacements for Reuben and Simeon. He tells Joseph, which is odd, because and just thinking through this, and I haven't done a real in-depth study of this, but it's something interesting to think about, that Ephraim and Manasseh are mine. The children that you father after them will be yours. And I don't know that we find that Joseph fathers any more children. But now these are going to step in, and they're going to become part of the 12 tribes of Israel, Ephraim and Manasseh, and we're going to hear a lot about them. But back to this just for a second. Back to this, God picking the underdog. It's going to be several generations down the road. 450 years or so. That's just rough math. That we're going to hear God say through Moses to the people of Israel as they get ready to enter Canaan. I chose you, not because you were the greatest, not because you were the most righteous, not because you were the most numerous. Right? I chose you and you were the least of all the nations. And it's out of the least of all these comes Israel. I think that's meant for us to see what it is that God can do with very little. How about that? A nation of slaves to begin with becomes the people through whom God's going to rescue everyone else. I know we like to think we're special, but we're not. God can do a lot with little things like us, if we'll just let him. How about that? Okay. 49. Look, we're going to make it, I think. All right. One more thing before we leave 48. It said Joseph is going to function as firstborn, and he's going to he receives this responsibility of taking care of Israel. That's part of it. It's going to be very important that he's buried back in Canaan. We'll talk about that when that time comes. But it is Joseph who gets the inheritance in Canaan, the land that he's got. He said, Israel said to Joseph, this is verse 21 of chapter 48, "Behold, I'm about to die, but God will be with you and will bring you again to the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given to you, rather than to your brothers, one mountain slope that I took from the hands of the Amorites with my sword and with my bow." It belongs to Joseph. He's not going to see it, but it belongs to him. All right, here we go. Jacob called his sons and said, "Gather yourselves together that I may tell you what shall happen to you in days to come. Assemble and listen, O sons of Jacob. Listen to Israel your father. Reuben, you're my firstborn, my might, and the firstfruits of my strength, preeminent in dignity, preeminent in power. Unstable as water, you shall not have preeminence, because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up to my couch. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Weapons of violence are their swords. Let my soul not come into their counsel. O my glory, be not joined to their company. For in their anger they killed men, and in their willfulness they hamstrung oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it's fierce, and their wrath, for it's cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel." All right, let's stop there real quick, because we have some stuff. All right, there's something that I wrestle with, and maybe you can help me with. Scholars vary on what all this means, right? Of what this is that Jacob is doing. Kissling, I believe, is the one that says this, and I tend to agree with him. That this is not necessarily spoken as prophecy. Okay? You may disagree with that, and that's fine. This is This is where Israel believes that their future will go based on what he's seen out of them, is one way of looking at it. Another way might be is these kind of things, the blessings from the patriarchs are incredibly important, which I think we saw that back with Jacob and Esau. That Jacob is blessed as the firstborn, right, when he goes in and tricks Isaac, and Esau is quite distraught. There's quite an issue here. So there is something very important about this. And so the words of the patriarchs do carry a lot of weight moving forward. Okay? But our first three contenders here are Reuben. Reuben, who tries to assume authority over Jacob by sleeping with his concubine. Is that right? I believe that's who that is. That's what that's about. We see it later in the life of David and his family. When one tries to usurp the authority, that's where they go. For whatever reason. Seems odd to me, but that's it. And so he starts out, you think it's really going to be good, right? Right? Preeminent in dignity, preeminent in power. You got to think Reuben's going, all right, finally. And he goes, but unstable as water. So no. So no, you won't have preeminence. And this is why. Simeon and Levi, which is fun. Simeon and Levi are the ones that orchestrated the massacre when their sister was raped. You remember that? They go back and say, well, you know, that's fine. You just have to be circumcised. And when they're recovering from circumcision, they go in and kill all these people. That doesn't make Dad very happy. And you can see it here. Right? All right, now let's get to Judah. Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's cub. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He stooped down. He crouched as a lion, and as a lioness who dares rouse him. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him. And to him shall be the obedience of the peoples, binding his foal to the vine, and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He has washed his garments in wine, and his vesture in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk. A lot of this language I don't get, I don't mind telling you. So like some of the compliments we see in the Song of Solomon, I just don't get it. Your teeth look like sheep. I'm sorry, I don't get it. But we've seen, I hope we've seen, Judah and the changes come over Judah since the beginning of the Joseph story. Right? He's the first one that says, hey, let's just sell him. Why kill him when we can make money? And then then we see him turn and begin to live up to the ideals of what God wants for him. Right? He cares nothing for his birthright. He's got sons that are out of control. But thanks to his daughter-in-law who pulls the wool over his eyes, or the veil over hers, I don't know how you want to say that, he is kind of forced to come to a realization of who he is, and then he begins to live that out. It's he who gives himself as the pledge for the security of Benjamin. He's the one who talks, who pleads for Benjamin's life in front of Joseph, and now we see his future. The future of the king is here. The scepter will not depart from Judah until this is done. Jesus, the Lion from the tribe of Judah. Okay, here we go. Zebulun shall dwell at the shore of the sea. He shall become a haven of ships. His borders shall be at Sidon. Issachar is a strong donkey, crouching between the sheepfolds. He saw that a resting place was good, and the land was pleasant, so he bowed his shoulder to bear and became a servant at forced labor. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a viper by the path that bites the horse's heel so that his rider falls backwards. I wait for your salvation, O Lord. Raiders shall raid Gad. He shall raid at their heels. Asher's food shall be rich, and he shall yield choice delicacies. Naphtali is a doe let loose that bears beautiful fawns. Joseph is a fruitful bow by a spring. His branches run over the wall. The archers bitterly attacked him, shot at him, and harassed him severely, yet his bow remained unmoved. His arms were made agile by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. From there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. By the God of your father who will help you, by the Almighty who will bless you, with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that crouches beneath, blessings of the breast and of the womb. The blessings of your father are mighty beyond the blessings of my parents. Up to the bounties of the everlasting hills, may they be on the head of Joseph and on the brow of him who was set apart from his brothers. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf, in the morning devouring the prey, and at evening dividing the spoil. Okay, so our two longest ones, right? If we just look at it that way for a second, the two longest blessings are for Judah and for Joseph. Not much of a surprise, right? That Joseph is going to be, this blessing seems to be the blessing of the firstborn. Right? All right. Now, here we go. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel. This is what their father said to them as he blessed them, blessing each with a blessing suitable to him. Then he commanded them and said to them, I am to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah to the east of Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field from Ephron the Hittite to possess as a burying place. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife, and there I buried Leah. The field and the cave that is in it were bought from the Hittites. When Jacob finished commanding his sons, he drew up his feet into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. He mentions, back as he talks to Joseph and blesses the sons, he mentions Rachel. Rachel is the favorite wife, right? Why Joseph is the favorite son, right? And why the protection of Benjamin. These are the two that come from Jacob and from Rachel. Rachel dies on the way, and they bury her, she's buried around Bethlehem. That's where she's buried. But when it comes time for Jacob to die, he does not request to be buried with her. As a matter of fact, he didn't request for her to be buried at the home place, but to be buried with Leah. That seems odd to me, doesn't it? You? Right? I mean, if we were writing this, right, which we're not, but if we were writing this, it would turn out different. So probably ought to thank God we're not writing it. But right, we go, and then, he's reunited with Rachel, and they're buried together, and there's a nice little grave, right? But that's not the point. Joseph as well, Jacob does not want to be buried in Egypt because that's not home. Home is going to be Canaan. And the few and evil days of Jacob's life have taught him that they ought to pay attention, and that God is going to lead them and to fulfill the promises that he's made. So he's going to be buried at home. And home is the only land that Abraham owned in Canaan. Right? The only spot that Abraham owns in Canaan is the field and the cave where Sarah is buried. Jacob may have taken that mountainside, right, in the battle, and I think that's the one where we have Simeon and Levi causing the trouble. But this is home, because this is where everything's going to point to. Jacob is very, very conscious of this, and so are others, by the way, Joseph as well, is that God is going to come through. And when he does, right, and when he does, I want to be there. God's going to give my ancestors, he's going to give our ancestors this land, and when that happens and we take possession of it, I want to be home. Well, there's a lot we could say about that, I think, don't you? There's a couple of things that come to mind. It's Paul in Philippians. I think it's in chapter 3. I'm not sure, so don't quote me on that. I know it's in Philippians. How about that? But our citizenship is not here, right? But our citizenship is in heaven. And it's from there we await the Savior. Peter and James, we talked about this quite a while back. But Peter in particular, who talks about us living during our exile, because we're not home, right? But we plan to be home when God makes this all right. When God comes through with his promise, we plan to be home. Right? With me? All right. Am I way out there? Have I just lost my mind completely? Okay. So Jacob wants to act like that's home, even though it's not yet. Okay? So how about us? We want to live by the commands of the kingdom that God's calling us to. Right? So when home comes, we're there. Right? That makes sense? Okay. All right. We're going to make it. Here we go. Now, I want to just kind of talk through this next little part of chapter 50. Jacob is embalmed. That's new for Israel, but necessary, because it's going to take a bit to get him back home. And so to preserve the body, that's what's going to happen. So the Egyptians, the Israelites and the Egyptians weep for him, mourn for him for 70 days. Joseph makes the plea to take him back to the land of Canaan. Pharaoh agrees. Joseph went up to bury his father, verse 7. With him went up all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, as well as the household of Joseph, his brothers, his father's household. Only their children, their flocks, and their herds were left in the land of Goshen. There they went up with him, both chariots and horsemen. It was a very great company. They came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan. They lamented there with a great and grievous lamentation, and he made mourning for his father 7 days. When the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning on the threshing floor, they said, "This is a grievous mourning by the Egyptians." Therefore the place was named Abel Mizraim, and it's beyond the Jordan. Thus his sons did for him as he commanded. His sons carried him to the land of Canaan, buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah to the east of Mamre, which Abraham bought. with the field from Ephron the Hittite to possess as a burying place. After he buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had gone up with him to bury his father. Now, it's the events after this that I want to hit very, very quickly. And we're going to need to because there's the bell. All right. They come back. So far, what we've seen is Joseph's brothers being just fine, right? Seem to be very, they've settled in a new land. Everything seems to be going well. But now that Dad is dead, they're worried. Right? Now that Dad's gone, now they think, okay, Joseph hasn't forgotten this. And so now he intends to do us some real harm. So they send a message, right? They say to Joseph, well, just in case you were planning something, Dad said don't, right? This is what Dad said before he died, right? Was that you were not to do this. And Joseph is like, I don't know what you're talking about. Now, I got to tell you, I wish I was more like that. Anybody else? I mentioned this last week. I know some, and actually am closely related to some world champion grudge holders, right? And it's so much fun. It really is. But this really gets to Joseph. They ask him to forgive them because this is what Dad would have wanted, And in verse 17, Joseph wept when they spoke to him. It's that you still don't get it. You still don't get it. You did this, but God's taken this and done something great with it. As a matter of fact, you're standing here in some of the best of the land of Egypt because of what God's done with what you did. I'll provide for you and I'll provide for your little ones. We could spend about a week or two right there. On both sides of that. Joseph is held up here quite well as a model for what it looks like to actually forgive somebody. Isn't he? And listen, for somebody to have reason to be bitter, Joseph's the poster child, right? But to go, no. Maybe the key to that is, a part of that is watching what God does with it instead of dwelling on the hurt. Maybe a part of that also on our part, and maybe something that we struggle with, and just something to think about as we get ready to leave the study of this book. Is I think one of the things that we see in the brothers is one of the things that maybe we wrestle with, and that is can we really be forgiven? Anybody else feel that way? Right? Could God really forgive me for these things? Or do we still think that he's holding on to them and just waiting for the right moment to drop the hammer? What we've got to witness, well, we're going to have to hurry. What we've got to witness in the book of Genesis, start to finish, has been the providence of God. Right? From creation and the direction that he wanted creation to go, from our ruining it to him continuing to work through it and to bring us back, and the way that God continues to work and to reach in ways that we go, I didn't see that coming, but he does it anyway, to work out for our good. You meant evil, but God meant it for good. We're going to end there because that was the bell. I'd act like I didn't hear it, but you all know better. But the providence of God and watching God work is not going to end at the close of the book of Genesis either, because Joseph makes a similar arrangement with the rest of his family. When I die, don't bury me here, because God's not done. And when we get home, when you all get home, I want to be there. All right? Let's have a prayer as we close. Father, we thank you so much for today, so much for all that we see in this wonderful, wonderful book. We watch and we see your hand work and the way that you direct affairs, and want so much to bless us. Help us to recognize that and to lean into those blessings, to follow you and to trust you, so that whenever it's time to go home, that we're there. Thank you for our time together. We love you so much. In Jesus' name, amen.